Hello, hello. I believe I am live. Maybe, maybe not. If I'm live and you're in the YouTube chat, say hello. Or if you're in the Discord chat, say hi. Hello, Stinky Soap. Asking, what is Git and GitHub, and is it better than Python? Well, throughout this, we'll tell you what Git and GitHub is, and it's more like a tool you use with Python. So we like Git and GitHub. It helps keep our Python code in order. Pretty great. And is mandatory to be used for our code jam. All right, so hi, I'm Kat. I am the events lead for the Python Discord server. I'll be hosting this session. This is a second session, like a repeat of the one that we held last night. So if you've seen last night's and you're looking for something else, probably just skip the session. But if we'll be covering the basics of Git and GitHub to get you up and running for the code jam. We'll give it a couple of minutes for people to filter in, notifications to go out and all of that, and then we can get started. This will generally be a more casual, chatty live stream. It will be less like a lecture and more just sort of going through things, answering questions. If I'm going too fast at one point, or if I gloss over something that you're like, wait, whoa, hold on, just post in chat. We'll be happy to slow down, go back, cover it. This session is for you. So if it's not working for you, let us know and we can adjust it to make sure that you get the most out of it. Yeah. And just in case for some reason, if you have to run halfway through the session or anything, these will be recorded. So you can go back on YouTube and rewatch it. Like, that's totally fine. And you can even view last year's, which was wild. I just did all of that. We have a question from Sai. Will we be covering branches this session? Yes, we do. Branches is what we consider really fundamental to working within a team when you're using like Git. So we will be covering branches, and at the end of sort of my lecture portion of the presentation, we'll be like practicing. So you can practice making branches, pushing, pulling, all of that good stuff. And for those of you who didn't see all of the announcements in our Discord, I have a repository that you can use to like practice all of these Git and GitHub commands. If you go into our Discord server, you will see Daylily just posted like the thread that you should go to. Post your GitHub username there, and I can give you access to that repository so you can push, pull, make branches, all of that good stuff, so you can actually get some practice in. And it's fine if this repository just goes nuts or something. It's intended as a sandbox repository. You can mess up as much as you want. That's the whole point of it. All right. And I see that the Discord announcement just went out. Thank you, Scofflaw. So we'll give it just a couple more minutes, like 3 or 4, and then we can get started. But how are your days going? Daily, I think there's about a 30-second delay on the stream that like StreamYard does automatically that I don't know how to turn off. So that's just fun. All right, I'm just adding some folks to our practice repository now. So this is, again, my reminder that if you want to get access to the sandbox repository, head over to our Discord and post your GitHub username there. It's really, I need to make sure that if I like ask a question, I need to give it like 30 seconds to then see like chat responses. And I don't move too fast. So that's the only thing, is I need to remember to take it a bit slower. Oh, so Intoxicated Tiger asks, isn't there a difference between Git and GitHub? Yes, we will be covering that during this presentation. Git and GitHub are two different things, but they're often used together. But it's important to know that they are different things, and we'll be covering that later. And let me just post the thread. And Blue asked if Mina is in the background this time. Unfortunately not. Mina's a paid professional and did not skip work today like me. So she's currently working while I'm vibing here. And this stream should be a little bit less chaotic than last night's, because my husband is also at work and therefore cannot interrupt the stream bringing in my cats to be paraded around on camera. All right, awesome. I see some people posting their usernames in our Discord for GitHub, so I'm adding those folks now. You should see a notification like within github.com to be like, hey, you've been invited to this repository. Go ahead and accept it, and then you'll have access to push, pull, create branches, commit, all of that good stuff. So the way that I sort of have this stream going is that I will be walking through the basics of what's Git, here's how you install it, here's how you set it up. You are welcome to follow along as I go through it. Or if you'd like to just sort of listen and absorb and take notes, you can do that as well. We'll have a section at the end where you can practice. And we'll also have a bunch of folks in our Discord chat able to help you out if you get stuck anywhere. And we'll be hanging out for at least an hour after the stream to help you through any practicing things. We can even join Discords like voice chat and screen share if you get stuck anywhere. We want to make sure that you feel comfortable with Git and GitHub, so you can go into the code jam feeling confident and comfortable. So, all right, I see a couple more. I'll get these last few usernames, and then we'll get started with the stream. All right, I think I got just about these last folks. Let me double check. All right. And then we will get started. All right, cool. So let us get started. Okay, so let's go through the Git and GitHub Bootcamp. So the first basics is, what is Git? So Git is what we call a version control system. So the whole thing that it does is it keeps track of the changes in your code and also who made the changes. So you sort of have this whole timeline history of what your code looked at different points in time. and also who made the code at those different points in time. This is very similar to how Google Docs does its like version history, where you can like go back and restore different versions. They essentially saw Git and they're like, oh, that's cool. We should try to implement our own version of this for Google Docs, because it's really useful to be able to go back in time, see who changed what, and also be able to, like, if for instance, like you really messed up, you're like, oh, I misunderstood something, we need to go back to a previous version. This version control system is how you do that. So Git is a little unique in how it approaches keeping track of the changes. What makes it unique is also really what makes it really popular. What it does is it takes full snapshots of the code, and that is what we call a commit. So when you see, hey, you should make a commit, it means that you should make a new snapshot of code. So other version control systems, because Git is not the only one, will instead take a snapshot of the changes. And that gets a little bit difficult if you want to go really far back in history. It has to compile a lot of different changes. Git simplifies it in exchange for more hard drive disk space. What it does is it's like, hey, this is your code at this point in time. This is the person that made this code happen. And that's what it does. So each commit is the full code saved at different points in time. And that's what the commit is, and that's how you have your Git history. We also have what we call our project, and that means it's all of the files within a folder structure. The way that Git works is you tell it a folder that you want to track. Everything in the folder, including all of like the subdirectories, Git just starts tracking all of that. Any changes to it, it's tracking it. So that whole project, like that whole folder that Git is tracking, is what we call a repository, or repo for short. And finally, and this is the really important part with Git, is that you can have different versions of your code exist simultaneously with what we call branches. My favorite analogy for this is like Doctor Strange from Marvel with different timelines. You have your main timeline, but you can also have like different realities branching. So all of them exist in parallel. Maybe one is the main one, but you can sort of swap between these different timelines to view different versions of your code. And they're all current and all of that stuff. For those who are getting access to the GitHub repository right now, I have made the main branch a protected branch, which means you have to make a pull request from a different branch to make changes to it. So I'm forcing you to learn branches. But that's what Git is. Now the thing is, where does Git run? Is it a program? Is it like a file you download? Like what is it? Git is a program that you download and you install, and it runs on your computer. It's similar to how technically Python is a program. It's like an interpreter that you can run. Git is something that is just always running on your system that you can then use and invoke with different commands. So the way that it keeps track of history is it will have a folder called .git. For folks on Windows, this will be a hidden folder, so you won't always see it. But in that .git folder is where it tracks all of its changes in different files. Now, we'll get this into a bit more detail later, but all of this stuff, Git runs locally. Like, it is entirely on your individual computer. What you can do, though, is there are places in the cloud, like Google Cloud, or maybe like your friend's computer they use like as a server, where it'll host the same repository, and you can then push and pull your code to that shared place. We call those places Git forges. GitHub and GitLab are examples of it, and we'll go into a bit more detail later. But the whole point is that Git runs locally, but you can share what you're doing locally to other places on the internet if you want. Git allows you to share it, and it has commands natively to like push and pull different versions of code with other people. Git is intended to be used collaboratively. And Richard, you are correct. I do have branch protection rules set up on the main branch. So if you want to make changes, you have to make a branch and you have to make a pull request. All right, so first things first is if you want to follow along, this is the first thing you need to do is you need to install Git. There's a download link for Windows. For Macs, you should install Homebrew. That is step 0. And then you can just do brew install Git. And for Linux, it depends entirely on your flavor of distribution. So just, I don't want to tell you to go Google it, but like I don't know. So you should go Google it because I simply am not a Linux user. So I don't know if it's like apt-get or Pacman or Yum or any of the other flavors. You can go and install Git and you can go through that. So we've downloaded Git and it's set up on our computer. The first thing that you'll do is you have to configure it. So there's 2 things that Git does. It tracks different snapshots of your code in points in time. And the second part is it tells you who made those changes. So we need to configure Git so it knows we're making the changes. So the things that you do, and you can also use GitHub Desktop. So this is a program that you can install specifically for like Windows and Mac. For Linux, it gets a bit harder. There's no official install for GitHub Desktop, but there's a couple of forks that you can use. But if you're in Windows, I recommend downloading GitHub Desktop. It's a desktop application that lets you interact with Git in a very visual manner. And so you can do a lot of your configuration from there, and it simplifies it. But just to keep this platform agnostic, we're going to go through some of the command line stuff. So there are 2 things that Git needs to know. It needs to know your name. So for me, that would be Kat, and your email. Your email is how it sort of like ties it to a person. The email is also important for when you authenticate with GitHub and when you finally attach Git to GitHub. So for me, for instance, I've already installed Git. But what I can do, so first, let's make sure I installed it. Yay, I have Git. What I'm using right now is Git Bash because it's a little bit more colorful than my like very plain PowerShell. But what I'd like to do is let me get the commands up on my other screen. There we go. Is we want to tell it my name and my email. So we do git config global. This flag means we're applying it to every repository. Anytime I interact with a Git repository, it's going to use this name and this username. For folks who use Git for like work and are working professionals, you'll see that they might specify local, and that will keep it local to a folder. So you can technically use different names and different emails for different Git repositories. That's a bit more advanced, and we won't really be covering that, but that is an option as you get like deeper into Git usage. So I'm going to do global user.name, and for me, it'll be Kat. And I get no response, which means successful. And then I want to set my email. So I'm going to do git global user.email. And for this, you would put the email that you are comfortable with being on the internet. So if you make code changes, and let's say you push that out to GitHub, people can look at your change, and they can see your email. Like that's how people know it's you. Later on, if you're not comfortable with sharing your public email, GitHub actually has a personal private email that GitHub will provide you just for your commits. So you can use this if you don't want to share your personal email like out with the world. So I'm going to share this in a little bit later. It's in the slides that I linked. But GitHub has like a special commit email address you can use so that way your personal email address isn't exposed. So for the more privacy conscious people, this is an alternative. I won't be diving too much into this, but this is an option for you. And for the email, for me, it would be something like cat@pythondiscord.com. This email no longer exists. Don't email it, but like that would be an example of how I would do this. I will use my actual email though. So you can do something like that. And that is the email attached to my GitHub account. So also, Git will... Okay, so Damien, you asked that Git name and email. So we haven't even touched GitHub yet. GitHub is not involved at all. This is just Git. I would recommend using the same email that you use to sign up with GitHub, but technically not required. This is just locally, just for your local Git. GitHub is not even in the picture yet. This is all just local program stuff on your computer. You can do this all without an internet connection, which ironically enough, I frequently does. I frequently have to do this without an internet connection. And Damien, so this is what I guess I'll call like a Git profile. So this is in Git, it's saying that like, hey, this is a user that is making all of these changes to the code. It doesn't really have a concept of accounts, but it's more like a user profile. Okay, I'm gonna pause for a second here and just make sure that I've answered any questions, and making sure I'm not missing anything. Okay, and we have fantastic helpers and events team folks helping out in Discord chat. Thank you, thank you. Y'all are the best. Cool. Okay, so part of this is also, for most Git users, like for people who like Vim, they love Git command line things. You can just configure what editor you want to use. I personally will die if I'm forced to use Vim for too long. And that's because I don't know how to exit Vim. So instead, I usually change it to either Nano or Notepad++, depending on which system I'm in. And you can do that with the git config -- global. You do core.editor, and then you do some sort of path variable. So for instance, for me, it would be Notepad++ on Windows. And if I'm, for instance, in my Raspberry Pi, I'll use Nano, because Nano tells me what the commands are at the bottom. That's why I use Nano. But that is one of those things you can do. I have a question from Damien that says, does that mean you can put an email that's fake / does not exist? For locally, yes. It doesn't actually have to work. It doesn't really test that. If you want to push it out into the world, depending on how you authenticate with GitHub, sometimes it does need to match. So it depends. So question from Kedar. Hopefully I said that right. What are these editors used for? So editors will be used for writing your commit messages. Each time you make that commit of like, hey, here's a change in the code. This is what the code looks like now. Git's going to ask you to describe what that change is. And so that'll be called a commit message. It has a title and a description. And you can use that editor to write it. Because sometimes the descriptions in commits can get quite in-depth and quite long. So question from Ertiza is, can different users work on the same Git profile? So usually you want each user to work on a different profile. You want to make sure that each user has their own profile so you know who made what change. And especially if you use something like SSH keys to authenticate with GitHub, like later on, you want to make sure that everything sort of lines up and matches. Kedar, yes, you can just use Bash or the UI in your IDE. We'll actually go through that for how to make commit. I don't use Git on the command line. I use entirely my editor, and then I use GitHub Desktop to fill those last couple of missing gaps. We will be going over the command line just to make sure you know the basics, but technically you never need to touch it once you have Git configured. All right, so how do we use Git? This is how we're going to go through it. So the first thing you need to do is with a brand new project. So the way that we're approaching this is we are starting this locally on our computer. Let's pretend our internet is out, so we can't clone a repo. Nope, no internet connection. We're just locally on our computer, killing time until the internet gets restored. So we want to create a new project and we want Git to track it. So again, Git tracks from a folder and then everything inside that folder. So let's do that. Let's see what's in my documents. I'm going to create a new directory, and let's say this is my PyDis project. This is going to be my new special secret project. I'm going to move into that project. If I can spell, that would be even more helpful. Cool, I'm in here. And now I'm going to do git init, which is, hey, I want Git to start tracking these files. Ta-da, initialized. If I do ls-a, the -a there means that it can show hidden files. You'll see that .git folder. Because I'm a visual person, I'm actually going to go look into this over here. Boom, you can see .git. It's a little bit grayed out because it's a hidden folder. What I'm using right now is git bash, yes. And so this is the .git folder where this is the secret sauce behind Git. This is where it tracks all of the changes. If you're just starting out with Git, I would generally leave this folder alone. If you start altering things in the folder, you can alter what Git's history is. Git bash does work in Windows, yes. It's really nice to install. I like installing Git just for Git bash sometimes, just because it has some it brings all of the Unix commands over, which is helpful. You'll see like some folks who are really comfortable with Git, they might start altering things in like their hooks folder or their refs folder. If you're just starting out, don't worry about it. But occasionally you'll see some people like mess with things in here. But my golden rule, if it's in .git, I leave it alone. I don't touch it. But hey, this is now tracking. And you know how we know we can track? We can do git status. We're on branch main, so you can see that right there. We don't have any commits, and nothing's changed. There's nothing that we can commit. So pretty cool stuff. You can also do this through GitHub Desktop. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to be like, hey, we now have a repository, but I want to use GitHub Desktop, this application, to help manage it. So I'm actually going to add an existing repository, and let me go choose it. And PyDis project. I'm going to add this repository. Awesome. So now GitHub Desktop can also see this. You can see here, these are all the repositories that I'm tracking on this account. You can see the branch. Right now it's just main. And if I really want to, I can publish this up to GitHub, which I'm not going to do right now. It doesn't see any changes. And the really neat part is you can look at the history here, if you see history. For instance, on the GitHub Bootcamp repository, which some things were edited yesterday from yesterday's session, but you can actually see the history. So all of these are all commits. And so you can actually go back and see the history. You can see people's commit titles. You can see their description if they have any. So for instance, title, make it good. That's not a good title. Do as I say, not as I do. But you can see things here, and you can see that people here are merging pull requests, all that kind of stuff. So I like using GitHub Desktop for this reason, but you can also just use the command line. So ta-da, we did the git status, and we saw that there was this thing. So first things first is let's make a new file. Okay, I'm going to pause for a sec and answer some questions. And thank you, Fisher, for the singular dollar. I appreciate it. So what are the general needs or cases in which we might have to alter the .git folder? You have something which is called, I can do this, which is called pre-hooks or git pre-commit hooks. So essentially what you can do is in that like hook folder for Git, in this one, you can make a little workflow that every time you try to commit, this little workflow will run, and it'll make sure that you're following the rules. For Python Discord, for example, we have a pre-commit for our Sir Lancelot repository and our Python Discord bot repository, where if you try to commit something where the commit message is not following our standards, or if something in the file you're trying to commit, like, for instance, within PEP 8, it says that at the end of each file, there should be one extra blank line. This pre-commit hook will check through all of the files, and if it doesn't see that blank line, it's going to be like, whoa, you can't commit that. You're not following our rules. Don't do that. So people have a lot of hooks like that will run before you commit something. It'll help make sure that you only commit things that follow a standard. So that's one of the things that you'll see is people will often use pre-commit hooks. For the CodeJam, you don't have to worry about this. And in general, this is a more advanced feature. You'll see this on some of the bigger open source repositories out in the internet, or you'll see this in your workplace. But if you're just starting out, you don't need to worry about it. Yep, and Fisher brings a good point, is you can add things like workflows to the Git folders, and you can also do different configurations for Git. We have a question from Alphonse. Is there a difference between on-branch master or on-branch main? There is no main difference. It's just called a different thing. When I installed Git, I was like, hey, if I'm making a new project, I want that default branch to be called main instead of master. And it's just preference. Sorry, just catching up on all the questions. We have a question from Dar. So for pre-commits, some commit hooks will actually fix it for you. And then you can just double check that it's doing the right thing, and it'll just fix it. I don't like my pre-commit hooks to be too smart, because when things break, they really break. But that is my personal preference. I also don't like PyCharm because it tries to do too much for me. And I'm like, no, let me do things. So things like that. Damien, this is different than GitHub Actions. They're kind of similar in that there's a trigger and a workflow, but Actions is for continuous, it's more of a DevOps thing. This Git thing is just really for enforcing good code standards. At least that's how I usually see hooks used. Yeah, but GitHub Actions is definitely a GitHub special feature. We have a question from Semitech of, can we undo commits on the repo and push without forcing? And we'll get to this question in a little bit, but I believe, and people please correct me because I'm pretty sure I'm about to get this wrong, is no. If you want to rewrite history, you have to force it. Okay, but we'll get to that in a little bit. So we've now used Git. What we're going to do is we're going to go into using my favorite editor. So first things first is we're going to open my project. I like VS Code. I tried using PyCharm yesterday, and my poor Surface almost died. So PyCharm is a little bit too much for my little Surface. So sticking with VS Code, just because this is a very default installation. VS Code, it only has the Python extension, so lightweight. And yes, I'm using Solarized Light. Bite me. Bite me, Brad. Okay, so I'm in this new repo. This is the part of the things that this is where you can use your editor to actually interact with Git. So in VS Code, it's this little symbol where if you hover, it says source control. This is where Git lives. So this shows you all of the different things you can do. You can pull, push, clone, you can do commits, you can do branches. All of your Git commands live here within this little tab. But first, we have to make a file. So let's go make a file. So we're going to call this main.py. And we're going to do the very classic hello world. And I'm going to save it. all of a sudden you see that little symbol pop up, and that means, hey, Git saw a change. Let's go. So over here, you have different stages. So okay, so the way that Git works is I'm going to actually switch to a different program, is it has different, you can get code ready to be committed before you actually commit it. So it'll track all of the default changes. It'll track by default all of the changes it sees. So it's like, hey, this new file was created, and also you added text in this file. What I can do is I can stage that change. So what that means is that I'm saying, hey, this change, I'm happy with it. I am ready to commit it, but maybe I need to add a couple of other files. Whatever. It's saying that I'm almost ready for commit. I want to prep it for commit. Any further changes to this file, I don't want to get ready to commit. So I can stage this. But let's say I want to do some troubleshooting later on. Like I'm getting distracted. My coworker comes to ask me, hey, can you test this out for me? I can test it out without getting it ready to be commit. So I can do say print. Oop, that's a syntax error. And I can do goodbye. I can save it. But if you go here, you'll see that within my stage changes, the only thing that I've said I'm ready to commit is the print. However, it sees all of the changes, which is this additional adding a blank line, adding print goodbye. So you can, as you work on files, you can add things to be staged as you're ready to commit them. But we're not committing it yet. So far, all Git is doing is like, hey, you've made some changes. You've told me you're almost ready to commit this, but not yet. Just let me know what you want to do. That's what Git is essentially saying. So I just want to draw this out just to make sure that it's clear. But essentially, what you have is you have your working area, right? So these are all of your files that you are making changes to. This is you testing things, figuring out what you're doing. Like you're not sure if it's right or not. You're not ready to even show your coworkers. But this is just where this is your working area. I wish this would work better. Hold on, I got this. I'm doing this better. I've learned from yesterday. So this is your working area. Then when you're ready to when you're happy with how the code looks, but you're not quite done and ready to commit, what you can do is you can stage it, and this will be your staging area. So that's what I did when I did stage changes. That is the equivalent of git add. When I did those changes, that's me saying, hey, these files, I'm ready to almost commit them. I just need to get a couple more things ready before I commit. So this is using, it's the stage changes. Typically, if you're using something visual, it'll be called stage changes. Or if you're chilling on the command line, this is the same as git add. That is the command. So working area is experimentation. It's you figuring out what changes you want to make. The staging area is you're like, hey, I'm happy with this. I'm going to stage it and get it ready to go. And then the last step of this process is when you actually commit it. And that is when you tell Git, this is the new version of the code. You are committing it to history. So this actually gets saved to the local Git history. And this is done with, and this is what we call the actual Git commit. That is when you're actually committing it to history. So you can get all the files ready and staging. And then finally, you're like, hey, this is the new snapshot of code. I'm going to record this in history. And that's generally how you go through staging or working, experimenting, getting it ready, and then committing it to history. So I know in VS Code, it's experimentation. Then for stage changes, this is the I'm ready to commit this. Let me just discard those changes. Yep. And then finally, you can commit. So to go back to the slides, just make sure we're following along with them. We're going to do our first commit. So we've added the files, and that for on the visual aspect, that was me staging the changes. We now are ready to commit this to history, and we do that with git commit. So if we do this in the command line, you can see git commit. If we just did basic, so let's do git status. Hey, you can see no commits yet. We're on the main branch. But we have a change that's ready to be committed. If we do just regular git commit, it opens up for me at least, Notepad++. And this is where I can write the title, description, full message, all the good stuff. Right, like that's where you can do this. Arteza, git add is for staging, yes. And commit will only add stuff that's staged. So you can add stuff for staging, make extra experimentation details, don't stage that. And when you commit, it'll only commit what you said you're ready to commit. So it's really nice from a workflow perspective of you have the draft, the final copy, and then finally what gets published. So that's what you can do. I'm going to abort this. Yep, empty commit message means I'm aborting. Just kidding, don't want to commit. Because I don't use the command line to commit. I use my editor. So for here, what I do will be like, this is the title. I do 2 spaces, and then I do this is the description. The reason I always add in this extra blank line here is that if you go to view this later, especially in, say, GitHub Desktop or any other sort of visual viewers, it's actually not going to show me because none of these have descriptions. Hold on, I'm going to open one from the internet. What I do want to do is I'm going to look at, oh my gosh. I want to look at bot. There we go. No, that's too big. I lied. That's a lie. We're going to look at Sir Robin, which is our event bot. So what you'll see here is you'll get that title, and then you'll also get this description here. If you don't have this extra blank line here, the description will suddenly be part of the title. So you want to keep that extra space there to separate the title and then the description. And the reason I like using editors is because there are some you know how PEP 8 is like, here are some guidelines that you should follow when writing your code? Git has similar things. For instance, titles should not be more than 50 characters. So if I write a too long title, like my title is doing too much, my editor will yell at me. It's like, hey, you're kind of going over 50 characters. Maybe don't do that. My editor will tell me, which I love because I tend to write too much. So that's one of the things why I like using my editor, is it tells me when I've gone over and making things too long. So, but if I want to, I can be ready to commit. Ta-da! And it's ready. It's written in history. So I can go back. I can look at my super special Python Discord project, and you can see there, history. This is the title. If I go to the command line, I can do git status. I'm on branch main, and there's nothing to commit. and my working tree. The working tree is sort of like it tracking what changes you've made, and if you're ready to like stage changes, it's clean. No changes have been made since the last point in history. And if I do git log, it'll show me the last commit. It'll show me my title, description, the date, and also the author. So pretty good. I'm going to take a brief pause here. You should have good titles. At the end of this presentation, we will go through a couple of resources, including a great one over how to write good commit messages. Commit messages should tell you in the title broadly what the change is. Because if you're trying to figure out like what changes have been made, for instance, if I go to Sir Robin, I can be like, oh, cool. So a utility function was added. We've made the code more consistent. We've added support for viewing code jam things. We've made the wording better. Like, it's really easy for me to see what changes have been made. If you go to the check repository, if I just say like title, make it good, that tells me nothing. I have no idea what change was made. So you always want to have good titles for future you, because future you will not remember what you did, and also for your teammates. So write good commit messages. It should not just be fixes. If I see one word commit messages, I'm going to find you. They should be descriptive and they should be succinct. If you want to get into more details, go into the description. You have the whole description to go through. So definitely recommend. We'll be sharing some good resources there. So I'm going to take a pause here and answer some questions. So how large should commits be? So this is an interesting concept. There is the concept called atomic commits. In Discord, if you go to our dev-contrib channel and go into the pins, you'll see a really great pin from one of our owners, Sebastian. And he talks about this concept of atomic commits, where commits should be as small as they need to be while still being functional. So you want to make sure your commits are sort of like atomic, the smallest you can get while still being functional. Where if you had to revert between commits, you're not removing an entire feature if the feature is a big one. It's a little bit hard for me to like go through, but maybe towards the end I can pull it up and we can look at it and sort of discuss the concept of atomic commits, because that's sort of where I tend to go through in terms of how big should a commit be, and it's as small as possible while still being functional. If I see two words, slightly better, slightly better, but that better be a small diff. Like the number of lines you change better be small if you're if your commit message is fix bugs. And we have a question from Michael. So I'm a junior developer, and when I commit, I usually just do git commit -m the changes. So this is actually, thank you, future past me. So if you do -m, the first one will always be the title. And if you do a second -m, that will be your description. So that's typically how you do it via command line. We also have one of our owners, Joe Banks, in the YouTube chat with great knowledge. You don't want what commit file change on a large feature. So for instance, in terms of doing full things, you'll do multiple commits for one pull request. The commit does not need to be everything. You can have multiple commits to make up one full feature. You don't want to make reviewing a nightmare. Think about future you or your coworkers. Make their job easy. That way they'll actually review your code. He's a 10, but he doesn't break up his commits. Drops it down to a 1, Joe. Drops it down to a 1. So that's how you make your Git commits. This is all still local on the computer, though. Like, this is still us without an internet connection, right? And I've showed you how to do it in VS Code. If you go to PyCharm, if you go here, this little Git window, if this is your first time setting up PyCharm or Git on PyCharm. This will be called VSC, version source control. I've configured it to run with Git already, but you can see here we have things like commit, push, we have branches, new branch, a show git log. It'll show your uncommitted changes. It'll show stashes. I don't work in PyCharm, but we have a couple of great staff members who love it to death and use it for everything. So you can go ask them for help. But this option also exists in PyCharm. I'm going to close PyCharm before it eats my computer again. Okay, I'm going to pause just for a second to make sure all the messages are good. All right. All right, people are already answering for me in chat, so thank you to our fantastic helpers. Y'all make my life so much better. All right, so now we're going to talk about a little bit of Git theory. So what actually happens when we do Git commits? Like for instance, let's say I want to add a comma here, because yesterday Blue was saying that I missed a comma. So I want to make an extra commit. I'm going to make add comma. My description will be because Blue Nix told me to. I'm going to stage that change because I'm happy with that comma. One nice thing that I like about using VS Code is it will show me what the difference is between the current history and then my staged files. It's really useful for me to see if I maybe accidentally staged like debug statements that need to leave. So I'm going to commit that. And let's go look at it in GitHub Desktop. So this is the title and add comma. So now we have two commits. Those are the two commits. But what does this mean in terms of Git? Well, let's go through that a bit. We're going to talk a little bit about Git theory. So for the people who really love their computer science theory, and especially if you go into university and pursue computer science like as your major, Git is technically what is known as a directional acyclic graph. That doesn't mean much to me, honestly. I took a machine learning class. I know Git still means nothing to me. It's not really important for understanding Git, but what is important to understand is that what it does is it creates a timeline of history. So what we'll have is we will have a commit. So each of these circles is what I will call a commit. It is a snapshot in history. It contains all of the code just in history. There is a person who made it, this new change, and when it was made. So this is going to be commit 1. As we add commits, we add to our timeline, right? We make this chain bigger. There we go. So we now have commit number 2. And these are linked in history. So if I do, for instance, a git log, it'll show me the history of this is the most recent version, and this is how we got here. And so that's what the Git history is. The way that Git knows which commit is the right one is it will have what you'll see called head. And head is the head of the top of the stack, the very beginning of this linked list. It's not really a linked list. I like to think about it like a linked list. That's what makes sense to me internally. Technically, it's a stack. But Git, whenever we're like, hey, what's the code? Git is like, hey, it's this commit. This is the newest commit. This is it. This is the head of the chain of history. So as we add more and more commits, as we add more changes to our code, it's going to move what the most recent point in history is. I don't know if this is better or worse than just me drawing it out, but we're gonna roll with it. So these are all linked together. And these commits, so I'm numbering them, but technically commits are hashed. So they have a very long hash associated with them that you can reference them by. For instance, this commit 974 F2 Bravo 62 Bravo, that is the commit hash. Most people, when talking about commits, they'll use the first 7 of the hash just because the hash collision is so low that you can just go by that first 7 and that'll get you close enough. But this is technically what like my numbers are. It's the commit hash. So, and as we add them, Git will update which one it's pointing to. So after we add a bunch of changes, Git's going to be like, hey, this is the beginning. At some point, you will eventually be like, oh man, we need to revert changes. Whatever changes we made, somehow our tests weren't in depth enough or we missed it, we need to revert. So that's when you do git revert or git reset. You're telling Git to go back in history. And the way that it does that is by adjusting this head here. So it adjusts where this is pointing. So if I say, hey, Git, we need to go back. We need to actually, this is the correct code. We do git revert or git reset head. And all of a sudden it points to this being the most recent. And all of a sudden this link in time is severed. So you have the difference between soft and hard. Soft means we're not really deleting commit number 5 off the face of the earth. We still know it exists. So we can go forward in time if we need to. If you do git reset hard, that means we are erasing this commit off the face of the planet. We are Thanos snapping this. It is going away. Never coming back. Never existed. So whenever you're doing like git reset and you see the word hard, just think, just make sure, just take a second, just take 5 minutes, just get off your chair, go walk around for a bit and make sure that's what you want to do because you will be rewriting history. Because remember, Git, each of these commits is snapshots. Technically, if I wanted to, I could remove commit number 3. I could rewrite that history and Git would be fine with it. If I tell Git, hey, be fine with it, it's going to be like, all right, I guess that's always been the history. So that's what's happening with Git when you do commits, is you are creating this history, this timeline history. So, and this is where we talk about Git branches, because we've mentioned that we're building this history. You can have different timelines. This is my favorite Doctor Strange analogy of how does a Git branch work. So a branch is a different version of your code base. It's not a previous version. It is parallel. It is happening at the same time as your main stuff. So you can have a different history and different commits. It is a different timeline. That's how I like to think of it. So why would we need this feature? Like, why do we need different versions of the same code? Well, it allows you to work on different features at the same time, and you don't have to worry about them interacting with each other. So for instance, I've told Scofflaw to go implement a new feature in Sir Lancelot. But at the same time, I've told Joe that he needs to go complete a different feature, but also in Sir Lancelot. So rather than having them work on 2 different features on the same like main branch and like have that be really hard to track to see like, wait, Scofflaw committed that, but I was trying to follow like Joe's commits. Like this is hard for me to like keep track of. Instead, we use branches. Scofflaw will make a branch for his feature, and Joe will make a branch for his feature. And both of these branches are separate from that main true branch. So generally, if you're adding new features, you want to make a branch, develop the feature on that branch, and when it's ready, you merge it in. So let's go into this more and actually like what this means. right? So let's say this is our code. We have 4 commits. And this is the point where I'm like, hey, Scofflaw, you need to go make this new feature. And he's like, okay, well, you're asking me for the impossible. This is brand new feature. I don't know if it'll work. So what he's going to do is he's going to make a branch. And the branch this time will be colored yellow. So all of a sudden, for Scofflaw, the history is going to go this way. So he has this new commit that he's testing stuff out with. Meanwhile, the main branch is still developing. Like we're still going. We are adding new commits to this main branch over here. But because we're living in a different timeline, and like we've chosen commit 4 as our deviation point, Scofflaw is chilling on our yellow branch, developing features. But this also makes it really easy that like Scofflaw doesn't have to worry about what's happening on the main branch as he develops his feature. Like he doesn't need to keep pulling in new code if he doesn't want to. He can just focus on the feature. And if other people want to help out, like let's say I'm in the middle of writing a new land spot feature and Scofflaw's like, hey, I'm stuck on something. Can you switch to my branch? I can just switch and the rest of my code stays intact. I don't need to worry about trying to find his changes or opening new stuff or like, oh man, we edited the same file and now they look different. Doesn't matter. What you can do is just hop timelines, aka the branch, and Git will just automatically change all of the code for you and you'll work on the code related to that branch. This will probably make a bit more sense in practice. So at the end of this is when we'll sort of go through the practicing and you can see what it looks like to hop branches. So you can have all of these different branches. For my practice repository, I have made it so that you can't directly commit things to main. You have to make a branch and then you have to merge the branch back into main. So let's go over that. Let's say Scofflaw's like, I'm amazing. I have finished this feature in 2 commits. It is ready to be added back in. You have 2 options here. There is something called rebasing and there's something called merging. So what you use when depends. Most often, just go with a merge commit. It is good to use in almost all situations, while rebase has more restrictions on when you should and should not use it. Rebase can make a cleaner. So let me actually write this down. So we have rebase versus merging. And we have some resources to like better explain the difference between these 2 sort of branch features and when to use what. But essentially, rebase will let you keep a cleaner Git history. It'll look nicer. It'll look cleaner. For instance, if you go to Sir Robin, we use merge commits. So you'll see these commits where all it does is merge. Some folks aren't really a fan of that. They don't really like these merge commits because you still see the same stuff elsewhere. And you're like, do we really need this like merge commit, a commit telling us that we're merging the branch in? Sometimes it's good because it retains the history. But sometimes you're like, I just want a clean history. I just want one linear thing. So it depends what you want. But let's go through the difference. So when you are rebasing, so right now we're going over rebasing. What you're saying is, you see these changes that Scofflaw made? Let's pretend they were made just now. And all we're going to do is we're going to erase this link and we're going to move them to the very end here. And now we're going to rename them as well. So rebasing is essentially you being like, hey, we're just going to lift these changes and just stick them on the very end. It will have no idea that technically commit 7 was commit 5 on a different branch. It has no idea. This is a brand new commit. We just sort of like airlifted it and dropped it at the very end. That's what rebasing does. You don't always want to do rebasing because what you're doing here is you're rewriting history. And Git wants to make sure that the history doesn't change drastically. Like there should still be, the history should be the same. So let's say I've already checked out a branch and I checked out Scofflaw's branch. So I see 1, 2, 3, 4, and then this commit 5 and 6. All of a sudden my history for my Git, like I'm like, what is this? I see these changes, but like I have no idea where this came from. My history doesn't match. And Git is like, what is going on? Our histories don't match. I'm not letting you do anything. Sort it out. And that's where, like, if you mess with the history, because rebasing does rewrite the history, it can get messy. So the alternative is we do merging. So I'm going to make this yellow instead. So that's rebase. Whee. And then so merging remembers the history. Merging sees this 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, and it's like, okay, I see that. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that image, like the whole branch, and we're going to add an extra little commit over here that we'll call our merge commit. And it remembers that it used to be connected. It used to have the same history, but now it's changed. And there will be this extra commit number 7, which is what this merge commit or this merge pull request looks like. These merge commits will be like, hey, this commit is adding in this branch. Merge commits will generally work even with wacky Git histories, and you can see the history of it. It just won't look as clean because you'll get these merge commits in there. But generally, if you're not sure what to do, just do a merge commit. It'll be fine. So that is why you use branches, and that's how you sort of realign the branches. If you go to GitHub, I'm not actually sure if I'm logged in on this computer. I'm not. Fantastic. I'll show this a little bit later. But when you actually go to like make a pull request in GitHub and you merge, GitHub will give you the option of rebasing, merging, or squash merging. So you have a couple of different options there. But that is branches. And that is why you should use branches. You get to keep these different histories concurrently, and they won't interact with each other. And then you can merge them back in when you're ready. So there's a couple of different ways that you can approach branches. I have my favorite that I'll talk about. So the first version, and I know that my best friend loves this version. I'm not really a fan of it though, it's called trunks. This is typically when a person has a branch that belongs to them. They will develop features on that branch, and generally no one else really touches that branch except for them. This works well if you generally work on features sequentially. You will work on the login form until that is done. Once that's done, you commit to main. Now you'll work on your authentication, and like you work very sequentially. That's called the trunk method. It's the suitcase method. The other version you can do is feature branches. This is my personal favorite. This is also what Python Discord uses for our open source repository. Every new feature you want to add gets its own branch. That means you can work on things concurrently. Like for instance, I want to make improvements to our Serlansabot uwu command, but also I need to like maybe fix some of the stuff with our epoch time command or something. Like maybe there's 2 things I want to do. I can just have a different branch for both of those, and I can just switch back and forth. This is great if, like me, you like to switch with what you're doing all the time. I'll be like, I want to work on this today. Okay, I want to work on that today. I can just have these feature branches, and you can switch between them. I know we use this for Python Discord as well because it's easier to work collaboratively with people. Like for instance, I'm developing a feature, but now I have to go on a work trip and I don't have internet out in the middle of nowhere, Utah. Hey, Scofflaw, can you take over this feature for me? And Scofflaw can just take over my branch and write directly to it. So I'll make some commits and then he'll finish it off for me. feature branches make that easier to make that happen. So those are different branching strategies. So I'm going to pause. I know that was just a lot of information with branches and rebasing and merging and squash merging. Let's make sure we're all on the same page and that questions are answered. So any questions or any clarifications people want? I know that I moved a bit fast during that. If you're in our Discord chat, Joe just posted a really great graphic of what merging versus rebasing looks like. Highly recommend you go check it out. It's a nicer image of what I tried to draw. So go check out our Discord chat for a good visual explanation. In the meantime, I'm going to catch up on some of the giving people access to the repository. All right. Richard is their actual experiencing using rebase merges doesn't quite match up here, and it might not. I've been known to be wrong frequently. Our resident expert, at least on rebasing, is Chris, our resident admin. He uses rebases as if his life depended on it. So if you have a question about rebases, go bother Chris. He's our resident expert. In fact, Chris uses rebase merges so often, he'll use them even after I reviewed a PR. And then Git is very angry that our histories don't match, and then I need to do some force Git commands, and then I usually just review the code and stop testing it. Over in our Discord chat, we have a couple of questions about squash merging. So squash merging, let's say you have a whole long list of commits. Squash merging, all it does is it puts all of those commits into one. We have been known to use this feature at Python Discord, and we'll mainly use it if there's a lot of feedback on a change that someone made, and it results in a lot of different commits that maybe don't need to exist. So it's someone who's new to contributing, which we love. We love new contributors. We love to help them get set up. And during the process of learning, they've made 20 commits, when realistically it could be 2. And that's fine. Our repos are designed to be a learning repo. But what you have as an option is you can squash merge. So that is the difference between rebasing and merging, and why it can be problematic when you start invoking the cloud. Rebases are great, but can go wrong fast, and merges are more or less guaranteed safe. So that's the difference there. Rebases, oh so pretty, but can go wrong pretty fast. But to go back about squash merging is you have 20 commits and then you squash it into one. This is useful if your 20 commits include things like fix typo again, fix bug. Okay, actually fix the bug. If those are your commit messages, then maybe a squash merge is worth it. You don't need all of that polluting your GitHub your Git history. And that's typically when you would see a squash merge be used, is if just through the process of learning or going back and forth working on a feature, you end up with more commits than are really needed. Sometimes it's easier just to squash merge it into one commit. So that's the one option there. Typically, if you have really good atomic commits with really good messages, you don't need a squash merge. We rarely use a squash merge, and we'll only use it if someone really spent a lot of time writing has a lot of commits that maybe aren't the most informative, and that's about it. Victor brings up a good point. After rebasing, you need to force push to your local origin, or the history would be a real mess. And Blue, wow, everything Joe says needs to be written down into a Bible. All of these beautiful quotes. Indeed, Joe is in a very rare, helpful, and not too shitposty mood. Suyash, you have perfect timing. The answer is now. We're going to start talking about, we've looked at Git. We have looked at setting it up. We're installing it, setting it up. We have made a project. We've made changes to our project, even have branches. And now we are ready to share our beautiful Hello World project with the world. The world needs to see this. This is groundbreaking. So now we're going to talk about GitHub. So let's talk about it. Git. Git is the version control. Up until now, we have not touched GitHub. We have no idea what GitHub is. Remember, our internet has been out, can't connect to the world. But hey, good luck. Good news, our internet has been restored and we can show the world this amazing project. This is where we use GitHub. So GitHub is different than Git, right? Git is what actually manages all of this version control stuff. Git is what actually manages the commits, the branches, the merges, all of that stuff. GitHub, all it does is it sees those Git projects and it sees those repositories and it's like, oh, cool. That looks neat. I'm going to store it. So all it does is it stores that Git repository in the cloud, the magic cloud that we all love so much. But of course, it does a little bit more than that. It has some additional features that makes it easier to collaborate with people. Because the whole point of storing it in the cloud is that other people besides you can access it. So you can work with your teammates, you can work with your coworkers, you can contribute to open source. GitHub takes your local Git, puts it in the cloud, and lets other people connect to it. So now you can push your code up to the cloud, someone else can see it and pull it down to their machine. And that is the purpose of GitHub. GitHub doesn't do actual version control managing. It delegates all of that to Git. Git is really the core of it. GitHub just allows you to collaborate with other people around the world. So we need to connect them. We have a Git repository, and GitHub wants to know who this belongs to. So there are two methods here. You can use SSH, which is Secure Shell Protocol, which I spelled protocol wrong. Go me. And SSH is also what you use to access, for instance, your Raspberry Pi. If you can SSH, that's the hacker voice, I'm in type of thing. We have some links here. I personally don't use SSH. I use the other version. I use personal access tokens. The reason I don't use SSH is because I'm a Windows girl. I don't use Linux. I don't use a Mac. I use Windows. And historically, up until Windows 11, SSH in Windows has been a bit of a pain to set up. If you're on Linux or Mac, though, just use SSH. It has everything you need, and it's easier to set up than a PAT. But personal access tokens, that's what I use. Personal access tokens is like your Discord token. It's this long token that's like, hey, it's me. I have this, and only I have this. That's how you know it's me. So what you'll do for a personal access token is you'll go to GitHub. You will create it. It'll be very, very narrowly scoped. You can create an access token where all it does is give you read access to one repo. So it's a little bit different than a password. Because it doesn't give you access to your full account. It just gives you very narrowly scoped access to what you tell it to. You can keep it in a safe and secure place. I keep mine in my password manager, Bitwarden, or you can use something like the Git credential manager, or you can use the Windows credential manager. There's a couple of options. Do not, I need to look you in the eyes. Do not put it on your desktop in a text file. You need to not be like my coworkers who keep this token, the access to all of their Git repos, in a text file on the desktop. Don't do it. This is like your password. Don't do it. And those are the options. So you can create a new SSH key. I'm going to post my slides right now onto the chat because it has all of the links that you need. And I'll post it in YouTube as well. I will not be walking you through setting up the SSH, but these guides do a really great job of walking you through it. And we have helpers in the chat who can also help you walk through it. I'm not going to walk through it just for the sake of time. And also, I'm like absolutely certain I would somehow expose my public key, and I don't want to do that. So these are the options. And for this portion, you can work on it while I'm presenting, or you can just hang back and when we get to the let's practice section, we can really dedicate some time to getting you set up for it. But we will have some time at the end to help you with this, but I won't be doing a specific walkthrough just because it can depend on people's systems and everyone works at a different pace. We find it's easier if we can help you as we go through it. So those are the options. For the folks on Windows, you can tell Windows to use the Windows, you can tell Git to use the Windows Credential Manager. If you need help with this, go bother Joe. He just installed Windows 11 the other day, and so he's the one that has done this. So go bother our owner about this. But overall, your two options are SSH or your personal access token. I use the personal access token. All right, so we're going to talk about how you actually work with Git and GitHub. There are really two main commands you need to know, and it's push and it's pull. And you can do both of that, not through the command line. So let's go through scenario one. We have changes we made locally. So we have our project and we want to push it to the world. We do git push, and then you do the remote and the branch. So the remote for the command line is the actual URL of the repo. So for instance, for the GitHub Bootcamp thing, it would be HTTPS, Janine9 GitHub. Nope, it would be github.com/Janine9VN/git GitHub Bootcamp. We would have to put that into the command line when we do this git push, the full URL, and then we tell which branch we want to push. Of course, typing that URL each time, we're not about that life. You can add an alias. So you can do git remote add. You tell it the name. So maybe I can just do git_bootcamp, and then I add the URL. So that way, when I do this git push, I can do git push git_bootcamp, and then the branch. And then it knows that when I say that name, it's pointing to that URL. So you can do that, or you can use this GitHub desktop. So if I do repository, I can push or I can pull. And then I click these buttons and it will do what I tell it to. Pull means you're pulling it down from the cloud. Push means you are pushing your changes up to the cloud. I have a little cute graphic here. So push means you're pushing it up to the sky, up to the cloud, and pull means you're pulling recent changes. And if you ever wanted to pull changes, maybe our Hello World project is a huge hit, and other people are contributing to it. If we want to see those changes on our local machine, because right now they've pushed it up to GitHub, and now it only exists on GitHub and their machine. We want to see it. So we can pull it down from GitHub. You can do the same thing, where instead of push, it's pull. And within here, it's just repository, pull. You can also do this in your editor. If I go here, I can just do pull and push. Sometimes I literally never leave my editor when I'm collaborating with people because I can just do everything here and also communicating on Discord. So those are your options, is you can just push, pull as you go. And that's the basic of how you work with Git. All of the main stuff of adding things, commits, and branches, all of that is in Git. The only parts that GitHub really does is that you're pushing, you're pulling, and how you merge different things, that can exist in GitHub. So there's a couple of other cool commands that we think are worth mentioning that you should know about that we won't cover here just because they're what we would call intermediate or advanced features. So Git rebase, we talked about that earlier, where it lets you sort of like rewrite history. You can add an argument called -- interactive, and you can tailor what you want to change like to your heart's content. You can change what the commits are. You can change the ordering of the commits. You can change the content of the commits. You can change just the title. You can pull, you can cherry pick. So say you're working on this main feature branch, and then I see Scofflaw on one of his really old branches had a really cool feature that he abandoned. I can just like pull that commit and drop it into my branch with this interactive. I can cherry pick it. Again, gets into really intermediate to advanced usage of Git, where you can really rewrite history. You can start pulling features from different timelines or branches. But it's worth looking up if you use it. Hi, Joe. If you use Rebase Interactive, I recommend having a guide open next to you as you do it. That is my thing. Everyone, Joe is now with an audio chat. Let me see if I can make... Nope, can't do anything. But if Joe ever wants to pipe up, he's welcome to. And then also, this feature was taught to us like yesterday by one of our helpers, KJ. If you do git add -p and then the file, you don't actually have to commit the whole file at once. You can like pick which section of the file you want to commit. So if ever you're working on a lot of things and you realize that only like one function you really want to commit, try out this command. See what you can do with it. I've heard it's really cool. I haven't tried it yet, but it's worth it.
You know what they're called? They're called
Hello, Joe.
You stage individual hunks of a file. It's a fun word, isn't it? Hunks. But yeah, git add -p -patch is very cool.
Thank you, Joe. Okay, so let's talk about what else GitHub brings to the table. So we know that GitHub lets us share our project to the world by putting it out in the cloud and lets other people access it and contribute to it. It does more than that, though. It has a feature for pull requests. Pull requests is really just like extra magic sprinkled on top of merging. So if you go to here, what happens is when you try to, let's say you've pushed a branch and you're like, okay, I want to put this on main branch. Somewhere up here will pop up like, hey, what do this branch was just created and has changes. Do you want to make a pull request? Or you can just go here, you can do like new pull request, and you can sort of walk through what branch you want to bring into main. But what it does is it lets you, before you merge these branches or like rebase, it'll let you review it. Like you can walk step by step through code. So for Asterisk Ops added a really cool like description of what the changes were. You can see what commits they've made. You can see more comments and everything. So when you're working with teammates and you want to like review each other's code, you can do that through GitHub. So let's look at the files changed. And it shows you exactly what has been added. So we had this new markdown file, changes to 2 existing files. You can walk through it. It's really cool. All sorts of stuff. Yes, and Talha, could you please share the slides? In our Discord channel, they are pinned. And I'm also just going to reshare it right now. Feel free to walk through these slides later at your own leisure if you want. And this is really cool. You can also, through like GitHub Desktop, you can check out pull requests. So for instance, Dorson has a pull request open right now that I'm going to review after this bootcamp. And when I do this, if I open this project, like this pull request can be sort of considered its own branch. So I've opened this branch. This is the pull request related to it. And I'm taking a look and I can review it. PyCharm and both VS Code have a similar feature, especially PyCharm. PyCharm's Git and GitHub integration are like top tier. You can just check out PRs without ever leaving PyCharm. So it's really useful if you just want to review pull requests, you can just set your branch to it and run it and review it. Pretty cool. So that's what a pull request is. It's, hey, I want to merge it. Can you verify that what I want to merge is good? And then other people will review it. You can have like conversations and everything and like alter code. Like for instance, let's go to our Sir Lancelot repo. Python Discord, Sir Lancelot. Let me show you like what some of these conversations can look like. For instance, we have this issue where we want to preserve in Sir Lancelot. You can see that Shenanigans here wrote a really great description, described what they were doing. You can see the commits. You can see Numerlore here is like, hey, I have a suggestion. You can use this if you want. You can see changes. Shenanigans even posted a screenshot here. Screenshots are great. You can see here that Numerlore was suggested some changes. So Numerlore is like, hey, you can use this really cool feature here. You can do that instead. And they're like, oh, awesome, awesome. And then approved it. So pull requests let you review and work with your teammates to make the code as good as it can be. My one recommendation is that treat the pull request and the whole reviewing process as a collaborative experience. It is like walking to your coworker and being like, hey, I have this code. I think it's in good shape, but I think it can be better. Can you help me make it better? That's what a pull request is. You always want to get the code into a really great spot, and you do that with the help of others. So it's not people criticizing your code. It's you working with other people to make it really awesome code. So don't consider it like an adversarial thing. Make it collaborative. Make it fun. So that's one of the features, pull requests. Something else that GitHub has added is called forking. For the code jam, you do not need to worry about this. If you should not need to fork anything during the code jam, like don't worry about it. For the code jam, you should work directly to the repository that your team leader will create. You should not have to fork during the code jam. But let's talk about forking. So essentially what it does is it lets you clone an existing GitHub repository, but it's different than your usual clone. What happens is you're cloning the cloud version of it. So that way, when you download it locally, if you push any changes, it goes to your cloud version. It doesn't go to the original cloud version. So for instance, the Python imaging library, or PIL, existed for a while, and that exists in GitHub. Pillow, and eventually it stopped being developed. And so other developers are like, oh man, like that's a really good imaging library, but it needs a couple of updates. So what they did is they forked it on GitHub. So it's still like you can point to Pill, but Pillow is its own development. So they can develop their own features independently from Pill. And that way it has this related history, but ultimately like they're separate repositories on GitHub itself. So pretty interesting. That's forking. Again, for the code jam, do not worry about it. And then finally, GitHub Actions. This is GitHub's foray into letting you do DevOps. I know Joe really recommends GitHub Actions as like a good first step into learning DevOps. Because what it lets you do is it lets you do continuous integration and continuous development, CI/CD. So what that does is that if GitHub has certain events that you can hook into. For instance, if you have a new pull request on your repository, if a new issue is created, or you just made a new release, GitHub, for this, it's events that you can hook into and then trigger workflows. And GitHub Actions is where you write these workflows. Like for instance, for Python Discord repositories, we have a GitHub action that whenever it sees a new pull request, or it sees like a new push to like a pull request that has been made to it, it will run linting and testing on it. So it's going to check all the code that was just pushed and make sure it follows by our standards and guidelines. And it's going to make sure that it's tested and that nothing will break. You can even take CI/CD one step further. And as soon as a new pull request is merged, it can instantly restart our bot so you can see the changes live. So as soon as a pull request is merged, the bot restarts, boom, changes there. No manual intervention needed. That is the continuous deployment part of it. Really cool stuff. For more information, sort of about DevOps, and if you really want to dive into actions, check out our DevOps Hour with Joe that we did last year. It was a great talk.
What a great talk. What a great guy.
If you haven't noticed, Joe has a really big ego. For the CodeGem, though, you shouldn't need to worry about actions. But sometimes if you have a really experienced team leader, they might set up some actions for you. So it's good to know how some of this stuff is running or how some of it works. And it's through GitHub Actions. So if you're interested in DevOps and you want to get more into it, start with GitHub Actions. It's a really good place to start. So those are the features that GitHub brings to the table. We have GitHub Actions, we have forking, and we also have our pull requests and the overall review process. Really top-notch stuff. And so here is sort of the end where we talk about different tools and different resources. What if I don't like the command line? Same girl, same. GitHub Desktop. I've been vouching for it this whole time. I love GitHub Desktop. It's free. It's available on Windows and Mac. It's not officially available on Linux, but there are some great supported like forks that you can use and download, and then you can use it. If you have the GitHub Student Developer Pack, get Gitkraken. Gitkraken is really good because it has really cool like graphs for how to review things. I am no longer a student, so I don't have access to the GitHub Education Pack, but while I was in school, I loved using Gitkraken. Really, really great. And then you also have the VS Code with Git integration. There's a couple of guides on how to use it. For instance, it shows you how to commit and stages. So if you want to spend more time and like really learn how to use your editor, we have guides for that. We also have guides for it with PyCharm. So it shows you version control, create it. You can do all sorts of stuff. You can even do like resolve conflicts, all sorts of great stuff within PyCharm and VS Code itself. And if you really like the command line interface, you can get even more of it. GitHub has its own command line interface. There's a download for Windows, but don't be fooled. You can download it on any place. But if you never want to leave the command line, download this. You never have to leave it. You can Vim your heart out. So all of the different installation instructions, really cool stuff. Wait, what is there? Nope. Okay. Additional resources and guides. And remember, I did post my slides on both our Discord chat and in YouTube. So you can just have these links available for you. If for some reason, maybe you weren't able to catch this full workshop or went a little bit too fast for you, that's okay. People have done this, but better. Here are some of them. Git and GitHub for Dummies. This will get you up and running, like from nothing to CodeJam ready. Within this full article, it's pretty good. It'll walk you through everything. I recommend this if you just sort of want to get set up or if you need to get re-set up on anything. It has a lot of really good diagrams, better than my hand-drawn ones. If also you prefer video, Free Code Camp has a pretty decent one that you can go through. If you really want to find out more about Git, like in depth, there is this CS page from Stanford where you can go through Git like with everything. It'll show you everything. It can show you branch wizardry. Like if you just want to really dive into it and learn all that you can, this is how you do it. Git magic. We have two great guides for when you've maybe flown a little bit too close to the sun and all of a sudden you have a mess on your hands. We have, oh no, I have a Git mess. Follow the flowchart and it'll tell you what you can do to fix it. And sometimes it's just to leave it ugly. So it depends. And we also have oh shit Git, which in a very similar vein, it's like, oh no, I did something terrible. Like for instance, oh shit, I need to change the message on my last commit. Here's how you do it. So you can just literally, whatever you just said out loud, you can just find here. And you're like, oh, you accidentally committed to the wrong branch. Here are the commands that you can do to then fix it. So this is great to have handy, especially when you're in like a jam and you're like, oh no, what did I do? This will show you how to do everything. Really great resource. And we also have how to write a git commit message. I like to reference this a bunch of times. I like to reread this about yearly as well. But it'll show you like why good commit messages matter and how you go about writing a good one. Because it's a skill. Writing a good commit message is a skill, just like writing a good doc string. So this goes through it. It shows you how to do everything, the 7 golden rules to writing a great message. Really great read. Recommend reading that in advance of the Code Jam. We also have some interactive resources. We have Oh My Git, which is a fun game that teaches you Git secretly or not so secretly. So you can download this and play it. It's really fun. If you still don't quite understand branching, that's fine. There's a thing you can do to learn that. It's this really cool interactive website where it'll visually show you how branches work as you create them and as you jump between them. So if you're struggling a bit to wrap your head around how branching works, this is a great resource you can use. We also have some further reading and cheat sheets. So we talk a bit, this article talks more in depth about merging versus rebasing. Really great article by Atlassian. And it has really good, and Joe shared these images earlier of what a merge looks like, what a rebase looks like, and also what you should do when. The golden rule of rebasing. So it goes through sort of the different scenarios if you want to go more into depth with that. And we also go through git fetch versus git pull. So if you've heard the term git fetch and you're like, how is that different than git pull? Read this and you'll find out. And also, sometimes you just can't remember the commands. Got cheat sheets for you that you can just reference. This one has a couple of examples, but at the very bottom, there should be a good little chart thing that you can print out. Really useful. I like having these handy dandy if ever I'm going through like a really like big merging process. And finally, we've reached just about hour and 40 minutes. Let's practice. We've gone through all of this information, and now I actually want to have you practice this and see where maybe we can clear things up for you. So here are the steps. You can ask for access to this repo. I think I gave everyone who commented in that thread on Discord access. If you're having issues, let us know and we can get you access. So you should clone the repo so it appears locally. Make a new branch on that repository. Add whatever feature you want. This can be a new file. You can edit an existing one. Do whatever you need to do. Make some sort of change. Commit that change and write a good message. And then push those changes back up. From there, you'll go to github.com and you can see the process for making a pull request. And then you can sort of go through that process. We have a couple of folks in our Discord chat that also have access to this repository that can sort of help you walk through what that pull request process looks like. But this is your chance to practice. And if you're having trouble setting up SSH or if you're having troubles authenticating, now is when we will actually help you walk through that. So let us know. Okay, in the meantime, I'm going to be right back because I just heard my cat knock something over. So I'll be back in like 2 minutes.
Hello, Street. It's lovely to see you all. Yeah, typical cats, typical cats. What random DevOps fact can you share with us today? What an excellent question, Richard. Random DevOps fact. Here's one. Netflix. This is a fairly common thing within DevOps spaces, but people might not know. Netflix deploys servers all around the globe, obviously. Netflix is huge. How do Netflix test that? They have a program called Chaos Monkey, which at random times will just shut down Netflix servers, which is quite fun, isn't it? That's a fun fact. So that's my fun DevOps fact, is that Netflix tests their production deployments by just randomly shutting stuff down. Thank you. Hello, Kat. Welcome back.
Hello, I'm back. For access to the GitHub repository, you can hop over to our Discord server and ask in the GitHub Bootcamp chat, and I'll give you access there. Oh, Vincent, this is not misspelled. This is very deliberate spelling.
No.
DevOps is our favorite sort of group of folks, second to events. But they do amazing things about as often as they like take down entire nodes.
True. So our internal DevOps channel is called DevOps and has been for about 3 months now. Cats work similar to Netflix's engineers. That's very funny.
Yeah, it's knocked over some of my protein powder that left out.
Oh, it could be worse.
At least it was capped. Like, there's not protein powder everywhere. Luckily, like I closed the cap, but
Cat's gonna get
was
beefed up. No worries, you're all so welcome for the cool fact. I know I give off great facts. I'm looking at the repo and I can't clone it. I can see all the files, but I'm not seeing an option to do that. There won't be a button online for cloning it, because it's something you need to do either through your editor. So if you open up VS Code, there's a button that says something along the lines of clone this repository, or you can use the Git CLI where you can do git clone and then a link to the repository. When you view the home page of the repository, you should see something like, it's the little green button just above the file list, with the, what are the name of those triangle brackets? And then you can choose to use HTTPS, SSH, or the GitHub CLI. Chaos Monkey sounds insane, but also probably quite effective. Yeah, it's a very good way of ensuring N plus whatever redundancy. They just knock off entire AWS regions.
And if you are not in our Discord server yet, that you happened upon this bootcamp, if you just if you type in your browser discord.gg/Python, it'll take you to our server, and you're very welcome to our server.
Going on in Discord. When you make a branch, it will make a copy of whatever branch you have checked out. Yeah, so whenever you run git branch or you create a new branch through VS Code, it will take the working tree of the branch you currently have checked out. So that means if you branch off main, that's a feature branch, but you should always check that you are actually branching off main, because otherwise you might accidentally branch a new feature branch off an existing feature branch, and things could get a little bit crazy. I know in VS Code, you can do, if you click the branch thing in the bottom left, it'll say you can create a branch from, and then you can explicitly pick main. So then you know that you've got things definitely right. But yeah, just double check the branch you're on before you create a new one. Otherwise, when you open a PR, it will try and merge both features in, because you'll have the start feature branch, the new feature branch, and all the commits on there trying to go back onto main. So it can get a little bit chaotic. There are valid use cases for that, but for the code jam, you probably want to try to keep things simple.
Yeah. Rather than dumping you with every single scenario ever, we just want to set you up with enough Git knowledge to not be overwhelmed, but still walk into the code jam confident.
Hell yeah. You git clone the repo. Git clone clones this to Quizzer in Discord. You git clone the repo, and that clones every branch that's on the remote. So it'll clone the main branch and any feature branches that have been pushed to the remote, and so on. You don't just clone a single branch. You can't just clone a single branch. I personally write commits directly on GitHub. You're evil, and I will see that. I'll cry. I've installed Git, but I'm on Windows 10, so SSH is not the best option. Right. If you are setting up Git from scratch, yeah, I just use the Windows Credential Manager. It's pinned in the Git GitHub Bootcamp. If you just run the git config credential.help or whatever command, it's the last pin. That'll pop up a nice little window when you try running a git command, and it does all the credential storage and authentication for you. So you don't need to even generate a personal access token.
Yep. But generally what you do is you git clone the whole repo, and then from there you make a new branch. And that new branch will like remember and like copy over the history of that branch that you're like copying from.
Yep.
All right, we're gonna hang around
There's
for
many.
Go ahead, Joe.
I was just saying, there's many tools that will visualize the whole Git branch process. So you don't even have to set anything up on GitHub. You can create a new repository locally and mess around with branches. And there are plenty of tools like Git Kraken, or even just if you give specific parameters to Git log, it'll give you a tree where you can see, oh, this is where things have branched off. This is where things are rejoining. I know there's stuff with VS Code. How do I make a new branch locally on VS Code? Yep, Cat is now showing it on stream. That's one way of doing it.
Yeah.
That's not how I do it, though.
What? You can also do it
That's the way that I like to do it.
Yeah. You can just click this bottom main one, and you can create a new branch, or you can even pick where you make it from. We got Joe on camera. Oh, he's wearing a Gopher shirt. Sorry, I got a ban Joe from the stream. Supporting Go. Not in my Python Discord stream.
That's what I mean with the create new branch from. So create new branch will create a new one based on the branch you're currently on. So if you're on main, it creates a new branch from main. But if you do create branch from, it'll let you configure way more, which is nice.
Like for instance, I now have two branches. I have my hello branch and my main. So I can do create a new branch from. I can do E is my new branch name, and I can choose if I want to make it from the branch I just made, called hello branch, or main. And generally, you want main.
Yeah. And that little hash afterwards is the last commit, which is quite useful to see where things are up to. So you can see that hello branch has the exact same commit as main because we haven't added anything to hello branch. So the branch exists, but there's no new leaves on the branch, I guess. Get this person a Python shirt. I have plenty of Python shirts in my wardrobe. It's just I was kayaking earlier, so I wore an old shirt, and the Golang one just happened to be that. When you install Git on Windows, you can choose to install Git GUI too. Yep.
Yeah, there are a lot of like Git visual tools to use. There's like a bunch out there. Definitely find the one that works for you, even if it's just more command line tools.
This Golang shirt is going to the duck pond. Brilliant. I'm trying to think where I got this Golang shirt. Dude just casually strolls in after kayaking and drops a Netflix fact. Thank you. Yeah.
Siddharth, yes. Technically, the teams are ready. We were just going to do it after the boot camp. We wanted to make sure that we had people available, because we have our bot do a lot of it. So all we do is we feed our bot Sir Robin, like, hey, here's a CSV of the teams. And Sir Robin creates everything in one shot. It creates all of the channels, the roles, everything. So we like to have some of our core devs and DevOps around, just in case something slips by us in testing. So it'll be later today at some time. So if you're having trouble pushing, it means that you cannot push to main. You have to make a branch. You can push to the branch, and then you try to get access. If you're trying to push to a branch and have access, post your GitHub username over in our Discord channel in the GitHub Bootcamp text channel, and I can give you access as a contributor.
When you push it, it makes a pull request. Not automatically, no. You publish the branch through however you're doing it. You can do it from the CLI, you can do it from VS Code, whatever. But until you manually go through the PR creation process, that's not going to be there. Because you can have branches there, and then you create a pull request to propose a Git merge. So you can do that through VS Code, PyCharm, Gitkraken, CLI, or just GitHub itself, obviously.
Yeah, usually GitHub will prompt you to be like, hey, we've noticed you've made some recent changes to this branch. Do you want to make a pull request? Perhaps it's ready. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes you're just publishing it so you can get someone else to take a look, but it depends.
You can also do draft pull requests. So if you want to kick off the review process without having it be superficial, you can create a draft pull request, which means it'll be grey, but people can't merge it, but they can see it, which is quite useful when you're working on a feature in your CodeJam team. When you've got something, but you're not quite ready to merge it, you might want to make a draft so that people could see it, but they won't accidentally merge it.
It's great for if you haven't tested it yet, but you still want people to look at your logic. That's what I really like draft pull requests for. It's hey, I haven't tested it. I will in an hour, but just let me know if my logic makes sense.
Publish change in VS Code, attempt to push the committed change onto GitHub. Yes.
Yes. Yep, that'll push it. It'll also do, I think, a push pull. It'll do both sometimes, just for convenience. Yeah. Unfortunately, no. Our qualifier is closed, and we are very locked down. We will have a game jam in September. That's a little more loosey-goosey, but we would love for you to join us next year. The Code Jam's a lot of fun. We also have other really fun events happening. For instance, Pixels is returning in October-ish. And we even have a new event coming up called Revival of Code, aka let's do Advent of Code in the summer. So that'll be spinning up right after the Code Jam ends.
That's crazy. Is anyone in the UK? How are you enjoying the weather today? It's pretty hot, right? 40 degrees, that's crazy.
That is very warm. Okay, otherwise, we've officially hit the 2-hour mark for streaming. So I'm about to wrap this up. We'll still be hanging out over in our Discord channel. I'm just going to go give my face a rest, turn it back into goblin mode. But if you have any questions or anything, feel free to hop over to our Discord channel, and we'll be happy to help you out and everything. before we go, okay, so everyone in the Discord channel, oh, I see it. Okay, give me 1 sec. Adding you to the repository now. Okay, I've just invited you. Now we're good. All right, so we are going to wrap up the stream and end this. So thank you so much for attending, and hopefully this was helpful. I'm going to be opening a feedback thread up in Discord soon just to get some feedback from y'all for how we can make this better in the future, or if you want to see more maybe intermediate workshops. Like if you feel comfortable with Git basics, but you're like, I really want to learn more about like interactive rebasing, maybe that's what you want to do. Give us that feedback. We'd love to put on more workshops that are helpful for you. But thank you so much. And again, if you still need help, like we'll be hanging out in Discord. Just post your question. We're super happy to help. But thank you all so much for attending.